You sit in church week after week, embracing the truth of God's word. You believe the gospel and claim Jesus Christ as your Lord. Yet you continue to struggle with pornography. You feel like a hypocrite, returning to the sin you hate that mocks the God you love. You desperately wonder, is lasting freedom even possible? Yes, you can overcome pornography, but not alone. 2 Timothy 2:22 says, "Now flee from youthful lusts and pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace with those who call on the Lord from a pure heart. Only by repeatedly running from sin to Christ with other believers can you hope to enjoy lasting freedom." You can live with purity and integrity. Take courage, seek accountability, and do whatever is necessary. Get equipped at accountable2you.com.
Toby, Pastor Toby, Gabe, the show.
What is this?
Gabe, the show.
I was wrong. Gabe was wrong.
Pastor Toby, come back. We miss you, man. I miss you. This has been hard.
It's been 2 weeks. He's been gone for 2 weeks.
2 weeks, yeah.
But his son got married
so we can
Saturday.
excuse that.
Yeah.
And you got a chubby stand-in.
And we have Jason Farley, who's here. I am
Toby.
And last but not least,
like
we are
Chubby Bunny,
very happy to have Walter Kirn in studio. You've been to Moscow a couple of times now, and
never
every
in the
time
studio.
we wanted to get
tried.
you here.
We tried.
But there's a guy here that's just blocking you from coming over, and I don't even know if he should be in this room right now. But we're happy to have you here on the show on CrossPolitic. Thank you so much for joining us.
Jake's a difficult gatekeeper.
He is. Yeah. He keeps
Well,
us
had
contact.
I known that you guys were hiding behind the gate, I would have climbed the gate at night.
You know
Come
what?
on over.
You're
But-
all right.
Yeah.
You
but-
all right.
You all right.
But I made it through by hook or by crook. You guys pressured your I don't know, your elders or whoever they might be.
We bought him off.
And I'm glad to be here because I can already tell this is the lounge of the Lord.
Yo, did you just say the lounge of the Lord?
Yeah.
Yo, hey, producers, write that down. That's an ad.
Do something with that.
Lounge of the Lord. Oh, wow, I'm in.
All right, God is the Father. He's waiting and looking down. I'm already started off reading this ad bad, but you're paying attention to it more because of that. And looking down the road for all his prodigal sons to return. Will prodigal America return to the Father in repentance, confessing that Jesus is Lord, or will we fall to our own destruction and become a pillar of salt as a memorial for other nations? We need to ask Walter a question about that. Join us on Reformation Weekend, October 31st and November 2nd in Fort Worth, Texas, for the annual Fight, Laugh, Feast Prodigal America Conference. We can't wait to see you there. We'll spend the weekend hearing from Dr. George Grant, Dusty Devers, Steve Dace is coming, Pastor Wilson, of course, Pastor Toby, who's not here, Dr. James White. We'll be doing singing psalms, feasting, good food, good beer, prodigalamerica.com, October 31st and November 2nd, days before the election. We trust in we don't trust in horses. We don't trust in chariots. We trust in the Lord our God. We'll see you guys there in October.
I'm going to say this again because I think it needs to be said. We don't do breakout sessions.
No,
There's
we
a
don't.
reason for that, because our fellowship is the breakout session. Bring your questions, bring your issues, find other believers. There's a lot of, what's so fun about our conference is that there's a lot of great conversations going late into the night that you get to work through. If you're a new married couple, if you got kids, if you're thinking about baptizing them, this is like the very, seriously, the people just hanging out, having this conversation over some cigars, of Suburban, and working through a lot of theological issues together. And that's one of the things I love about our conference more than anything else. Great speakers, of course.
And
but
maybe
there's
Walter might come now. After
and
that
if-
ad
and if-
read,
When
after that ad
is
read.
it? When is it?
It's in October. October 31st and November 2nd.
What if we give
Doug
you
will
free
be there.
tickets?
He'll be speaking. It's a great conference, great people, great fellowship.
Great way to counter program Halloween.
Yes.
What
yes.
is Halloween?
What's that?
I'm not sure. It's this old pagan holiday
We own
the
them.
Nestle company thought up.
Big chocolate.
Big candy.
The big candy thought up.
Can't trust big candy.
Well, we'll be real close to the election then, and I do a politics podcast with my friend Matt Taibbi.
Yes.
We're going to go to the conventions, and I imagine by
You're going to go to the Democrat and Republican convention? Go to both?
well, I know we're situated at the Republican convention.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have a space at the Democrat convention. I wonder what the Democratic convention is going to be. They're going to virtually nominate the president using some
Dominion system?
or Zoom system, and so if he even shows up, Chicago, late August, for people who don't love sweating, isn't the greatest venue. But maybe we'll go. But by October 31st, I think the whole country is going to be in a complete state of utter rigid suspense about
what's going to happen with the Democratic president nomination.
Well, no, by October 31st, what's going to happen with the president in general?
Yeah.
7 days away.
Everybody, I remember maybe like a year ago, and I don't hear this talk as much anymore, but everybody really did think that Biden was going to step down or have some more miraculous fall, and here we go, Kamala or somebody else might step in, who from California. But it doesn't seem like that they're leaning that direction at all.
Right.
Right.
Well, you never know until it happens, and it's always sudden. And these are showbiz people, so they like to make their big reveals with a lot of pizzazz. So it's not like we're going to get too much of a warning if that happens.
I've always noticed though the Republicans do a horrible job of calling the plays on the left. So that's why I just haven't bought into it. I just noticed that we don't do a good job of that. And they always seem to have a better. They can call our plays and they can get us to move, but we can never really get them to move. That's how it feels to me.
Yeah. I also think it's pointless. I don't think
understanding their plays or calling their plays pointless.
I as a journalist technically maintain myself in a neutral, independent position. Don't identify publicly as a Republican or a Democrat. But if I were to advise the Democrat Party, I think that a last-minute switch out and the expectation that all this enthusiasm can suddenly be channeled to a new person and invested in a new base is probably a miscalculation. As much as people may be tired of Biden, as much as the party may think they've been saddled with somebody in serious decline, it's going to look weird when all of a sudden they just black him out and bring in the new guy.
Was that
they've been propping him up so well. They've been making such good excuses for him and such incredibly creative arguments that they're going to need a transition phase. It's like a family. It's like parents get divorced or whatever, and you stay with mom, and she says, "Here's your new dad."
Ta-da!
It takes a while, There's
no easing into this.
Yeah.
So, wait. So, you, as a journalist, you try to remain neutral. I understand that, but coming on this show, it's that you forfeited that because now you're a Christian nationalist. Now you're a racist with us, and
wait, I'm not.
It's over. Your neutrality's over.
No. Listen, I can maintain my neutrality in a hurricane. What they say about me doesn't matter. It's what I think about myself and what I know about myself. And I know wherever I go nowadays exactly what square they're going to put me on. I know that I come here. They expect me with a pitchfork on the White House lawn tomorrow. Bringing in the reign of the new fascist leader. That's what they want to pin on me. But I know what's up. I know I'm just a kid from the Midwest who grew up with a pretty solid education and very middle-of-the-road expectations about an honest, reasonable, united society of peaceful intentions and basic religious ethics that had guided it for a long time. And if that's a foaming radical now, if that's a Christian nationalist now, that's their problem, not mine.
As a journalist, you seem to me, you aren't like an ultimate skeptic, although you question a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
it seems like you're more of like an analyzer.
You can't. Yeah, I'm a drama critic.
Yeah.
Okay. For a long time,
drama queen critic.
My wife would call me a drama queen on some days, but I don't look at myself that way. Drama critic in this sense. Politics is showbiz in the modern media age. And it doesn't really resemble the left-right politics of, say, the French Assembly around the time of the Revolution, or, the British Parliament in the 1600s. It doesn't resemble those political eras in which the terms left, right, and so on were originally articulated.
Right.
What we've got in America is a very strange free-for-all in which different groups, institutions vie for power using these political sort of mobs called parties. And they betray their principles all the time, and they their hypocrisy knows no bounds, their ability to forget what they said yesterday. And so I think they deserve to be looked at as a kind of show or a movie or a stage play more than some serious, than what they believe they are. A bunch of serious legislators instituting policy, wanting the best for the country and working hard together, sometimes with conflict, to get what's best for all of us.
That's 100%.
No, it's a free-for-all, dude. And, they need to be watched askance by someone who knows their moves, can tell when they're acting, can point out when they're acting badly, can guess what the script brings next. A lot of what I do with Matt Taibbi is we just look at the script they're acting and we go, okay, what's the next act? What's coming next? One of the problems with America is I don't think America was meant to be obsessed with politics. America was supposed to be obsessed with raising its kids, securing its communities, building its schools, churches, factories, parks.
Working hard.
Yes. And putting forth the human project of mutual understanding, exploration, and productivity.
Yeah.
Politics, when it becomes an obsession at the level it's become for us, is a real drag on society. It's not productive.
Yeah.
It causes endless conflict over meaningless issues, which were often invented in order to create conflict, which is then managed by the pros. So I stand back from politics like I would if I walked into a bad neighborhood and I saw a big street fight going on.
Right.
I'd stay at a safe distance.
Take a couple pictures.
Yeah. Take pictures. I say, that guy doesn't have a left. That guy's drunk. That guy looks dangerous. There's some guys hiding around the corner and they're about to come in and change the whole thing. In other words, it's right to have a satirical, skeptical, and critical distance on this show called politics because it's not the serious, sober endeavor that it was in the past.
Well, and part of our nation's structure was, supposed to remove the emphasis of politics in our lives. That's all, states' rights.
Absolutely. One of the greatest fears the founding fathers had was the fear of party. If politics descends into party, and by that they meant partisanship, in which people start to identify with a side or a group which is seeking it to advance its own interests at the expense of the Commonwealth, that was considered a disaster. Well, they didn't succeed in preventing that.
How do you view secularism in all this? Because it seems to me the idea secularism kind of cast this idea that there's a possibility of neutrality in American politics. And everyone can kind of meet in this football arena of neutrality, and then the Christians can go back here, the leftists can go back here and go to our own ghettos. How do you see secularism related to our political problems now?
Who are the secularists?
Well, the secularists. The problem is an idea that
who waves that flag? Who's still pushing that? Brand.
I don't think it's being pushed anymore. I think secularism gave birth to what we have now. So what happened with secularism is it particularly Christians, I think, were duped by secularism, where they thought, oh, we can be neutral, we can keep our faith out of politics, or we can keep whatever. And then over time, the leftists gain more power because neutrality creates a vacuum. Someone's going to come in and dominate it. Some worldview is going to come in and overtake it. And I think what happened was Christians, I grew up in the church. I was born in 1979. And for decades, I was taught that, you shouldn't have your faith in your politics. But the secularists, the leftists were allowed to have their faith in politics.
Well,
Go ahead.
if by secularism you mean leftism, if it's just a
No, I'm and maybe I'm not trying to equate it with leftism. What I'm trying to say is secularism is the idea is that there's a neutrality in the public sphere,
right.
and so Christians would leave their worldview out, their Christian worldview out, but the secularists all along, or the leftists all along, were bringing their worldview into the neutral center.
Right, right. Well, in the 1950s, when we had a President Eisenhower and we'd just come off World War II, and we were trying to, take advantage of our industrial advantage around the world, the fact that a lot of the world had, needed to be rebuilt and needed leadership and so on. We had, as I say, a general as a president. He wasn't a particularly Christian figure.
Yeah.
He didn't run from it. I think he prayed. When you look at the speech he gave on D-Day, the last line of it is he beseeches the God for help and favor in this endeavor. But I think it was possible to look at American politics at that time as somewhat secular in a good way, in the sense that it wasn't. It didn't require you to state your faith when you got into the conversation.
Sure.
It didn't require everybody to raise their hands and identify. And when John F. Kennedy was elected, there was all this anxiety over whether you could have a Roman Catholic president. Would he answer to an authority outside the secular authorities of the United States? Would he answer to the Pope? It was kind of used as a knock on him, and he didn't. He didn't fulfill those fears. He was the victim of other forces. But
he fulfilled the CIA's fears enough that they had to.
But if you're going to try to draw circles, and in the first circle you're going to say this is the circle that includes us all as Americans, and what includes us all is let's say a devotion to the constitutional system, to a kind of general fairness and maybe Kantian do unto others as they do unto you set of ethics. And then you move up that and you say, well, there's some people who are even more intense in their beliefs, and they have particular religious beliefs, and they would like those beliefs protected at least from attack, and they might even like to see them propounded in policy, but they certainly want the right to exist. They want the freedom to worship. They want
the freedom not to get vaxxed.
Their values. Yeah, they want freedom to express conscientious objection to certain policies that would offend against their belief system. And then you get up above that and you go, well, there are also groups who are absolutely theologically devoted to a state which expresses their views in all things. Let's have a Christian state which instantiates in law various Christian beliefs. And there's a lot of diversity in that.
Certainly.
In that. And then maybe another group comes along and says, well, I come from the Party of Islam, and we want to, well, within that first circle, that secular framework, all those groups should be allowed to compete, I believe. I don't think the country is as a formal Christian republic that somehow propounds legally Christian doctrine, it would succeed. It's too diverse and so on. By the same token, I believe that the space for believers who represent how can we say it, 40, 60, 70% of the American people, whether they are hardcore churchgoers or not.
Believe in some form of the Christian God or something.
Yeah. It is absolutely necessary. I mean, the cultural foundation of the country, it cannot be traced back to many other sources than, Judeo-Christian believers, some of whom were a little deist, and maybe devoted to reason over an incarnate God. But here we are in Idaho. We've got, the Mormon Church right down the street here in Salt Lake City.
Yep.
It has some specific beliefs that conflict with those of other Christian sects and so on. And I like the fact that we have a system in which those differences can be adjudicated
and debated.
I don't look forward to a winner takes all society. I think they did a pretty good job of creating a framework which both promotes, how can I put it, which allows people to cultivate their spiritual and religious lives without bringing us to unnecessary conflict over things that we have a right to work out in our own consciousness.
Certainly.
Yeah. What I'd be curious of your thoughts on, because it seems like that is a Christian understanding of politics, that it has a limited sphere, a limited jurisdiction. Excuse me. Whereas the other options are totalizing right now. Marxism is a totalizing understanding where everything is politics. Socialism is a totalizing understanding.
It's also formally atheistic.
Right.
I mean, no matter how you slice it, Marxism is an atheistic, materialistic philosophy of life. And really, we can't see many examples of real authoritative Marxist regimes that have had any use for spirituality in general, whether it be Falun Gong in China or evangelical Christians or
Pol Pot or
It's a delicate balance. We did prepare for a country that would be a mixing place, a meeting place, and I don't think that many Christians would, let's be honest, Christians argue with each other.
We're good at that.
Endlessly.
That's our spiritual gift.
That's what our show's all about.
Yeah, endlessly. And we should, because we've got a scripture in which there's a lot of argument. We've got a scripture in which there's a lot of teaching that's a little bit ambiguous, a little bit parable-like, which challenges us to constantly reinterpret and, think clearly and creatively about what was being said. It's, there is no absolutely definitive interpretation of some of Christ's sayings. They're debated till today.
Yeah.
And that's why we have places like St. Andrews and schools all over the place. So if any group were to come in, decide that its version was definitive and the one that would be installed in law, I think it'd be Christian versus Christian pretty fast.
Right.
Which has happened. We did a thing that wasn't possible in Europe. We don't have a state church.
Right.
Many people came here because there wasn't one. My Hungarian ancestors came because they didn't want to fight for the Catholic Ottoman Empire. Yeah. He didn't want to fight in the Pope's army. Okay?
Yeah.
We don't want to reproduce that schismatic, endless division. At the same time, we don't, I believe, want to create such a small space for belief, for religion, for Christianity in particular, in the public square, that people start to feel they're trapped in a world they don't approve of, can't live in, are afraid to raise their children in. so on.
Can I go back to your analogy? Because I think that's exactly, I think, the issue why everybody is running to politics is because they are, you talked about the street fight, a huge brawl going on, and so everybody is seeing this huge brawl from their balconies and they're like, woo, that's crazy. Then all of a sudden a bullet flies through their window. And you're like, okay, now that's crazy.
Start coming to my house.
So then they secure their environments the best they can. But now the fight is starting to show up in their lawn, and the laws are coming in on them. Like you see so many pro-life people right now who are out at the abortion clinics, and they don't have any protection for saving life, right? They just show up with the FBI, they show up with the guns, and they're like, yep, you're going with us. It's like, I was just in front of a... And so we see like there's not an option for us in one way to not engage because the largeness of the political environment has spilled over and right into our front living rooms. And so people don't know, like, that'd be great if I can look at the fight from out there in the street, but that street fight is starting to come all the way in my front door.
Okay, and that's a great point. I mean, I don't think anybody who's being honest can't look at Canada and the United States over the last few years and not see that there has been really aggressive encroachment by the government, its agents, its law enforcement authorities, and so on literally the practice of. I mean, the one thing I never thought I would see in the country is the prohibition of the of a Christian services on Sunday.
That's right.
I don't know if that applied. I don't know if that applied to the services and gatherings of other religions. I know it did to some extent, but
yeah, the Muslims up in Canada, they got to worship freely while they're arresting Christians.
Right.
Well, here though, the Jews had to climb through the walls to get to there.
The dangerous part is that there is an element in the country that wants to push it a certain way, that is doing its level best to identify strong religious belief with potentially violent revolutionary fervor.
Yeah.
Without evidence.
Right.
You know, I've been keeping track of the riots in the last few years.
Only you.
I haven't seen the Presbyterian riots.
No.
Yeah, or the Catholic riots.
I haven't watched the Catholic riots.
Yeah.
I don't consider pro-life protesters outside an abortion clinic to be people who are engaged in
terrorism.
Terrorism. In fact, my second novel, a novel called She Needed Me, is a book about a evangelical pro-life teenager who's kind of had his soul rescued from this druggy adolescence of, goth self-indulgence, and he's been saved, and he starts protesting outside of an abortion clinic, and this young woman is going in to get rid of her baby, and he says, "No, don't." She turns to him and says, "Well, are you going to help me if I don't?" And he says, "Okay, I will." Mm-hmm. Biting off more than he can chew. And the story is whether or not this guy can live out the consequences of what
of his evangelism.
Of his evangelism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, it's an even fight. All books are only interesting when there's an even fight, when there are two sides, Sometimes he fails to do that. Sometimes he succeeds. Yeah. Sometimes she teaches him something. Sometimes he teaches her something. But I didn't consider that character a terrorist.
Yeah.
Whatever he was.
Yeah. Whatever he was.
He wasn't,
But really, let's be honest. A lot of things that are being attributed to, Christian zealots were just normal behavior 25, 30 years.
Oh, yeah.
There's nobody dropping off pallets of bricks for Christians to use in their
downtown Dallas. Yeah.
But at the same time, praying outside a public building, or wanting to gather, even though there's a health alert, or
well, if you remember, I was arrested here in town for singing psalms and not standing 6 feet apart.
Right.
That was in 2020. Our church was protesting our health emergency order, and Pastor Doug's solution was, well, let's just go sing psalms in downtown, and we did that for a couple months.
Right.
And then in September 2020, we did it at City Hall parking lot
That's what civil rights leaders did in the 60s.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
when we got to
yeah.
City Hall parking lot, there was circles sprayed 6 feet apart, spray painted 6 feet apart on the ground so they could objectively see that we weren't standing 6 feet apart and not wearing masks. And then we started singing psalms, and I got arrested.
Well, I'm all behind you. The civil rights movements of modern America and in other countries, some of the anti-colonial movements led by people like Gandhi in India and so on, all sprung from Leo Tolstoy's reading of the Bible, in which he said, well, the most important passage in this New Testament is resist not evil. So what you're going to do when you want to change something is you're going to show up and you're going to speak your conscience, but you're not going to fight. And you're going to maybe sing songs or, march or just sit there like they did sometimes in India.
So threatening.
And so we think of the civil rights movement sometimes now as a purely left-wing movement, but in many ways it was fueled by Christian leaders and Christian tactics, nonviolence and turning the other cheek and so on. So to make that behavior ominous, that behavior in the South was to the left a great success story that they like to claim for themselves. But that behavior all over the world has saved people, has resulted in rights for the undervalued, underprivileged, and you were merely acting in that tradition.
I think, though, that the reason that it's being interpreted as terrorism is because they are terrified of that happening again, but now they're the ones in charge. So, if you've got people standing outside praying, they should be terrified if God shows up.
Well, they think you're all suckers.
Interesting.
They think you're all praying there. It's not God they're afraid of. They don't believe it. They don't think you're going to be able to call down hellfire or lightning bolt or even judgment on what they're doing. They think you're deluded, superstitious people living in some primitive version of human culture. What they don't like is groups of people who communicate, have similar values, and are brave. What they don't like is your bravery. No opposing side likes to see another group that isn't afraid to die come toward them over the hill. No political group likes an enemy that isn't afraid to go to jail, or which can communicate with ease because all the people there understand each other and have a intuitive sense of common cause. We live in a society where the technology of politics involves getting everybody broken down into the smallest possible groups over every issue that could possibly be brought forth to divide them.
They want to split.
Yeah, we're going to
get as small a group as possible.
We'll subdivide every group, and the left doesn't realize what a terrible victim of it is itself. I think a lot of women feel they've been thrown over as feminists. They thought this was all women, and then they found out, there's good feminists and bad feminists, and there's these.
And now there's men that are women that are feminists.
Yeah, and then they have to contend with all those subdivisions.
Yeah.
And they thought they had this sort of powerful wing that represented, half of humanity, and it's been cut up into little pieces, and those pieces have been turned against each other, and they're shouting each other down. Well, the big man loves that. He wants to see everyone fighting. And then he wants to make deals where, come on out here, I'm going to prefer you. And you come on out here, I'm going to give you power. And we'll make coalitions, and they'll all be at my behest. And at some level, I don't think Christians represent a threat because of their beliefs, but just because of their ability to demonstrate cohesive, meaningful action over time.
They view us as a voting bloc that concerns them.
One that they can't move around in the ways they want.
They're trying with critical theory.
They How?
Well, if the race issue can get inside this church,
Right.
and split you into new fractions, well, now it's like right now the SBC is going through the issue: should women be pastors? Should they not be pastors? They have a whole document of agreement they've had for 20 years that was very clear about this, and now they're breaking up. The racial issue is also breaking up the SBC as well. It's like, well, we got to have more black leaders in here. We got to have, you guys had slaves, your founders had slaves. And so now you got these fractions just breaking off into each other so that now they can offer a new path forward. That's the same thing that you see happening in America in the same way. So they're trying. They're very much trying to do the same thing. And I think a lot of it has started in the church. I can remember, 2006, 2007? Divided by Faith came out. I think I was telling you about this.
Oh, yeah.
And when that book came out, it was really interesting because you had two different parties. One was a black community that felt like there was some representation to them, to their white neighbors. And they were like, man, look, this is what we're going through. Valid or not. I'm just telling you how everybody felt.
Yeah.
And then there was another group of there's three groups. The other group was like, I never knew anything about this. I never knew this was the culture that was going on right underneath my nose. And then there was the other group who was manipulating and said, listen, and then this is the church I was at. If you're not under black leadership, you're doing it wrong. You're in sin. Get under black leadership. Go sell your house. Move to Capri Green in Chicago and be under black leadership. And if you're not doing that, you're in sin. And it's like,
Oof.
what? Right? And so now you have a fight that you didn't have in Christendom before.
Yeah.
We were able to throw that inside the mix. And so I think critical race theory now is really starting to create more of that type of friction inside of evangelical circles and division to be able to move them.
Before you answer this, let me read this ad and we'll get it over to you. Kepler is an online marketplace for classical Christian education that assures parents maintain their agency without forfeiting the assistance and expertise of qualified conservative Christian teachers. Kepler offers university model courses in the classical tradition that fit your schedule and budget. Visit Kepler.education. Kepler.education. Actually, I have the whole thing spelled out there. And use our simple, not Kepler.edu, it's actually Kepler.education. And use our simple search tool to find the courses and teacher that meets your child's needs. Or simply ask for help to get assistance from a real human being. I love that in the ad.
One of my favorite lines.
Yeah.
All right. I'll give you, if you want to respond to that or not, but that was just my take on, I think there is some of the division that's happening inside of the church that we're trying to figure out how to heal between, because there's not like some of those issues that haven't been true. The SBC was not they weren't even supporting pro-life issues, I think, before mid-70s or something like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, so we have the critical theory or critical race theory, both of them, I think, have come in a way to try and say, look at you sinners, and we don't know what to do with the sin. We should.
We just know you're all wrong.
They just see us as wrong. And because of that, the Christians not knowing what to do with the sin say, well, you tell me what I should be doing to make things right. And then they say, well, here, hire these 3 black guys and everything is good. Are they qualified? Well, we don't care about that. Yeah. They're black.
And the Me Too movement was a similar movement.
Me Too movement. Yeah, I think this. Yeah.
And who are the agents of critical race theory who presume to come in and make these recommendations?
I think Russell Moore has been one of the clear leaders.
And J.D. Greer.
I think J.D. But some of these guys, I think, have been really played.
But who appoints them and who funds them and where does their mission begin?
Yeah, so the ERLC, Russell Moore was over that.
He was the president of ERLC.
What happened is, while they were there, they got there because in this transition time, they sounded like us. They walked like us. They talked like us. Mm-hmm. So much so that
J.D. Greer was a Calvinist. Russell Moore,
Russell Moore, on these topics, you could look at his stuff from 4 or 6 years ago, and you're like, wow, this guy is nailing it.
Well, he retweeted Doug Wilson,
right? And you would go back
10 years ago.
And so somewhere in there, while he was with Jim Wallace, working with the Obama administration, so a lot of people think he got co-opted. That's what happened. And so you see him making this turn and this push inside the SBC until the point he tries to blow it up by leaving. Mm-hmm. So I think those are some of the operators. And then you have another group of people inside of here that are really, hearts are torn, hearts are broken. And they're like, well, we just want to make things right so we can be unified. But they don't know that the way that they're
getting played.
Told to make things right is actually destroying the fabric of even the meritocracy that any minority needs in order to be able to advance in America, right? So those are kind of the players that have kind of helped us. And there's a lot of people underneath, but that's kind of the main players.
It's kind of the same thing that happened with our culture, or that you've been talking about. The broader culture is starting to happen in the church. And so you have you have white guilt in the SBC. That's
they got white guilt everywhere.
Yeah, white guilt everywhere. But that's a lot of, so some of these people can hear
here.
Not over here. No.
Well, you just wait a second. I'll give you some.
Hang on, Jason.
I got some in my back pocket. Go ahead.
So
Do you read much about white guilt in the Bible?
no. No.
Is there much race-based guilt in the Bible?
No, there's no such thing as race in the Bible.
What is the basis for taking certain Christians, taking their skin color as their first and primary aspect, and then asking them to do certain things based on that? Does and by my reading of the Bible, we're constantly surprised that groups, they weren't necessarily ethnic groups, but Samaritans, etc., will come in and often be recognized by Jesus as more faithful or something than people to whom the word was given more
Who
direct.
should have been
Who
faithful.
should have
Yeah.
been. The ministry of Jesus, as I read it, was one of constant surprises in which a lot of prejudices that the society had and classifications that it abided by were broken down under the banner of the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
Which kept rising above all of them, and including all of them. If there's subdivision in SBC or in the black church, and then there are these experts also who say we can cure it. Oh, you got this disease, and here we are to cure it.
Nope.
I would be as suspicious of them as any doctor who comes in and tells you didn't realize that you're sick.
Well,
But what you're going to need is me to make you better.
the church.
What you're really first going to have to do is admit you're sick.
Right.
I'm not a Baptist. I've got the strangest, like most Americans. See, one of the reasons I want to preserve a space for secularism is, what I mean by that is I want a big circus tent that can contain
Clowns and all.
people like me. People like me, who was born a Presbyterian, baptized a Presbyterian in Washington, D.C.,
Okay.
kind of fancy Presbyterian church.
Yeah.
Then my parents really didn't practice. I grew up in a very small town in Lutheran, Minnesota, very believing small town.
Lutheran, Minnesota?
Yeah, well, not the name of the town.
Yeah.
But
We have
Lutheran
got a producer
influence.
that's Lutheran.
Yeah,
so
Lutheran
he just spoke to his
influence.
heart right
I'm
there.
from Minneapolis, so
Yeah, if you know where Stillwater, Minnesota is,
Yes,
if you know where Taylor's
yes,
Falls, Minnesota is.
yes.
Taylor's Falls, little town of 500.
Okay.
I went to high school, okay? The strangest division that went on in our town was between Catholics and Lutherans. Me being neither, I couldn't quite understand why they were so at each other, why they sort of took such different sides of town and didn't socialize in certain ways. I saw minor religious differences between people who are great people. And my family was no longer practicing. They'd kind of been socialite Presbyterians. That was the church you got baptized in their neighborhood in Washington, D.C. suburb.
Yeah.
So then all of a sudden my father, when I'm 12 years old, has a terrible nervous breakdown. His father dies young of cancer. My father loses his job. He had a nervous breakdown. He's in the Salt Lake City airport, catatonic. They're closing the airport. 2 Mormon missionaries come along and say, "Sir, are you okay?" "No." Well, we can take you to our house and you can stay there tonight until you're better. Take him home, bring him back from a complete nervous breakdown in a public airport.
Yeah.
He comes down to Phoenix, Arizona, where we're living at the time, for a year, and says, "We're going to convert to Mormonism. This missionaries going to be visiting us every night." And suddenly, I'm a member of a church that I hadn't even heard of growing up in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And frankly, one whose theology, when presented rather quick fire by the missionaries, didn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm like, wait, a bunch of Jews got in a boat and went out in Central America, and then they turned different colors and had wars. And they buried the story of these wars, and a kid found it in upstate New York. How to get up there? He talked.
So that was the article where I found you, 2012. That's the article I first really read.
So here I'm kind of like a secular suggests that you're like, go science. I'm just like an American kid, not particularly religious, happen to have a Presbyterian baptism record, sunk into this pretty wild church that has some comic book elements, let's put it that way. Science fiction elements almost. They were great people. I learned a lot from my time in the Mormon church, especially about sharing and taking care of each other and showing up on moving day. Like you can't move your own couch if you're a Mormon. You in fact have to fight off the people who want to help you move that couch. They'll buy tickets to be the first one to help you move. So I didn't want to go on a Mormon missionary. I go off to college. I go to Princeton University. Now we're talking secularism. We're talking about power, money, science, knowledge, finance, all the things that Princeton University exists to support and celebrate, American corporate and financial power, etc. I don't give a thought to religion for many years. Until I start getting into trouble personally. Drinking too much. Life's going awry. I've made mistakes. I'm in situations with people I don't like. I'm in too deep sometimes. Sometimes I'm in rooms where I'm high, crying out, wishing whatever was in my body would leave my body, hoping that I see the dawn. And I start calling out to whatever this composite vision I had of all the versions of the Lord that had been presented to. We were all pretty similar in some ways when you're crying out to him at night, saying, get me to morning. And that started a process that brings me here, to which I can freely and openly and happily and joyously confess that I'm a Christian. We might have many theological disputes and crack some jokes about our personal differences and so on. But I'm home when I'm talking to you guys now.
And, if you were baptized as a Presbyterian baby, we're going to claim you.
Well, yeah.
So just know you're not going to get away from that.
Right? I did the right thing first.
Just know you're ours. We got to fix you and all.
So not only am I comfortable, I'm happy to be here, and I see that the path that took me here, however jagged it was a path that takes many people to this place, and it doesn't end here. I don't know where it's leading.
Yeah.
I can say that I've grown happier, more effective. I think better parent, better husband. But it's not. But Christianity isn't a self-help cult. It's not. It's not about making. It's not about, it can lead to all sorts of wonderful things in your life.
Yeah.
That's right.
And lots of people testify to how much better things got, But ultimately, it's a feeling that you know where you belong in the universe. You know how it works.
You don't know how. What you just said is so powerful, bro.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what I think we're facing right now is people are disconnected from reality.
Yeah.
And they're not anchored in it anymore. We were just talking about this with Gnosticism. And so one of the things that Christianity does is reattach you back to the reality, the world that you're really in and what God has done in that world.
Yeah.
Right? So that you can make sense of everything that happens. Otherwise, you're just lost and you're adrift and everybody's trying to tell you, oh, it's over here, it's over there, because you don't have any anchor.
Yeah, you're dislodged.
It's dislodged. I just thought that was such a great, keep going.
Yeah. The kingdom of God is a place. What they're talking about in the New Testament is a place. Where is it, though? Is it here? Is it up there? Is it everywhere? But they're talking about a place that we belong, a community, a realm. And to know that you belong to it, to know that you have a place in it, to know that, you have a home. And that it's a home administered by powers that you respect, admire, fear, and adore is a great feeling. But my parents are both dead. When my parents died, I was kind of in transition spiritually. And when my mom went, who I talked to every day, it was like I was living in a world where the roof had blown off the house.
Yeah.
The rain just came in. You know, when you're sad, well, just get more sad because there's no mom to say it's okay. And when my dad died, I went, when you're confused, Walt, and you don't know how to make a big decision, and you know you're being tested, other powers are pushing on you. You don't have dad to go give you the coaching speech and get you to stand up for yourself. Wait, I got something better. I finally realized, you know, I've got a focal point. I've got a creator. I've got a friend. I've got an adversary if I want one, but I don't. But I have a real adversary if I don't want one. And I've met him many times along the road. And frankly, one of the reasons I'm here is because I met that dark adversary. It was in myself. He was behind me. He was tricky as hell because that's where he comes from. And my appeals to a more powerful entity were always met. And the release was always guaranteed. And I asked for it enough times, and I screwed up enough running that experiment over and over when I'd already concluded it. And yet there was still patience, and I'll do it again, that I got to the point where I said, you know, let's live the rest of this life of yours with this as settled, in service to the truth, not trying to find it again, not trying to test it again. Mm-hmm. And it's better all around. I want everybody to be able to make that journey. There's a lot easier ways to do it. There's my wife, who's born Roman Catholic, you know, respects the priest, did the right thing, had the nuns teach her how to behave, has a conscience that, frankly, I don't think I could support. I mean, you know, I just passed somebody with old clothes on, and I have some clothes in the car that I was taking, and we got to go give these to her, you know.
Yeah.
We don't have time. No, you can't do that with my wife. So I want a situation in which people can go in and out and climb these mountains and fall away and come back and so on. I don't want to be so rigid that it doesn't allow for that. But I certainly want room for that. And I do not agree. I am horrified by the hostility to what's just people like me. I just like a weird sinner who ended up here. You know, I'm not running any revolution. I'm not some nationalist. I don't want you to go away so I can claim your space. But I will not back down about what I found.
Well, yeah, and I think that Christianity allows for a secular space. Secularism doesn't allow for a Christian space, right? When you've got the totalizing, the totalizing worldviews of Marxism and socialism and fascism, any kind of Machiavellianism, really doesn't allow for secular protected space where people can live their lives. And so I think that's why the foundations of Christianity in this culture make it possible for somebody, you know, to move through ideas and worldviews, you know, just like, I'm not breaking the law, I'm just working through ideas. That there's space in a Christian culture, a Christian society for that, that you don't get in, you know, Islam. And
because Marxism forces a conversion, Christianity does not force a conversion.
Right. Yeah.
And you know, you mentioned the intrusion of critical theory into Christianity. I think critical theory, as I understand it, is anathema to Christianity. Mm-hmm. The basic idea behind critical theory is that the world is just an endless power struggle.
Right. Right.
It's a drama of oppressors and oppressed.
Yep.
And that in every relationship can be analyzed as a power relationship between some group, usually of historical favored oppressors, and some other group. That is the philosophy of resentment. I resent what you did to me. It's resentment. It's the philosophy of getting even. It's the philosophy of thinking that our differences are more important than our
Commonalities.
It's a little like what a nightmare philosophy that if you had a big family, it would cause that family to break down among the children because it would children's obsessions with fairness and who got what and what happened yesterday and us three got that and those four got that will ultimately cause a complete meltdown of family order. It pretends to a system of righting wrongs. First of all, it comes up with a million wrongs, a million slights, a million things. It tells you that power relationships are all important, and then it comes in and tells you how it's going to fix them. But it never fixes them. It just rearranges them. It never transcends them. It never gives you a way out. It's just what Hobbes called the war of all against all, a never-ending war, and in which these authority figures usually come in as advisors or managers and say, I can make this situation work if you listen to me. And it's all about numbers. And if you have the three, like you say, you need 3 black people in this and that. And finally, it denies, I think, our basic status as children of God.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
without any equivocation.
Critical theory is Satan's worldview.
So we've reached our time with you, and I want to honor that because I'm enjoying this conversation. But I got to ask you if you would come on another time. I really want to talk to you about the Fourth Estate, the fall of the Fourth Estate.
We've talked for 3 hours already.
No,
Jake is over there.
it feels like 30 minutes. This is why the Nazi you brought with you. You got
You got a critical theorist over there trying to get us to let you go.
No, seriously, I would love to talk about the Fourth Estate, because I think
The death of journalism.
Part of one of the
That's
things
right.
that when I found you through you talking about COVID.
Yeah.
And you and Matt were one of the few people that I so appreciated because you guys were just saying, look, I'm a journalist. This ain't ladding up. This just don't work. And watching the Fourth Estate get shut down in a lot of ways, just like the church got shut down, I was like, whoa, this is serious and everybody should be jumping up and down on it. So I would love for you to come back. And
anytime. I'd love to talk about it. There's a lot to it. And I think because I've worked in journalism my whole life, I can enlighten people on how that situation really came about.
I would love that conversation.
All right, we're going to do that next time. Really grateful to have you on the show. Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate it. If you're single, get married. If you're married, have you some kids. And if you have kids, go baptize them. Until tomorrow, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Go fight, laugh, and feast. This is CrossPolitic.
Cheerio.
Tommy, come back!